Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Cheverton, author of the Game Night 999 series of Minecraft novels, as I bet you're aware. But I wanted to talk with you today about something called the Dark Night of the Soul. Let me tilt that. There we go. Dark Night of the Soul is probably the most important part of your story. And, well, aside from the very ending. But both of those they're related, as you'll see. The Dark Night of the Soul happens at the midpoint, and if you've watched my 7 critical scenes for plot outlining, you'll know that this occurs at the midpoint of the book. And this will typically be the point where it looks like the good guy is going to fail, and he's going to be defeated, and the bad guy is going to end up winning the day, and how are they going to solve this problem? And let's think, what in Star Wars, when was that? I'll have to think about that until the end. But let me give you an example of that in one of my favorite movies, which is the Lego movie. The Dark Night of the Soul occurs when Emmett goes to Cloud Cuckoo Land, and he meets all of the master builders and tries to enlist their help. And all of a sudden, all the micromanagers come in, led by Good Cop, Bad Cop, and they capture everybody, and they blow up Cloud Cuckoo Land, and it falls into the ocean. And Emmett and Wildstyle and his friends all escape in a submarine, and they go into the ocean, and they try to escape. But as I recall, the submarine sinks, and then it explodes. And when the micromanagers are looking for any survivors, all they see is this stupid double-decker sofa. And so they leave and figure all of those guys have been destroyed. And now the heroes pop up out of the double-decker sofa, and they're in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, and you think they're defeated. And there's no chance they can continue this adventure. And then they do. And then they're victorious at the end. And so that's a really great scene. In the movie I just watched the other day, which was Coco, which is a fantastic movie from Pixar, the Dark Night of the Soul there is when Miguel gets thrown into the big, huge cave by his idol. He thought it was his father. Or is he? I won't say. And he falls into this cave, and he's stuck in there, and he's got to get out of the land of the dead by sunrise, or he's stuck there forever. And now he's stuck in this huge cave with no way to get out. How's he going to win? He's going to be destroyed. And so it seems like there's no way he can be successful. And while I was watching this, I knew this was the Dark Night of the Soul, but I'm thinking, how the heck is Miguel going to get out of here and save the day? This is impossible. And that's exactly what the Pixar guys wanted you to think. They wanted you to think that it's game over right here, and there's no way that they're going to be able to do anything. So that was very carefully orchestrated so that the reader is scared and he feels sad for the hero or the viewer. And that's what you want in your books, is you want a point in the middle of the story when you think it's game over and nobody's going to survive. In my game night books, very commonly the Dark Night of the Soul occurs when it looks like either Game Night and his friends or Game Night and his army have been trapped and there's no way they're going to escape, and it looks like they're going to all be destroyed for sure. And then Game Night figures something out, and then they escape and they win the day. Yay! And so those I put in there on purpose, because at the Dark Night of the Soul, there's a transition that occurs in your story. In the first half of your story, the bad guy is chasing the good guy, and he's pushing him around, and all the good guy is doing is responding to the everything that the bad guy is doing. So the protagonist is trying to not get destroyed. He's trying to avoid getting caught. Like in Lego Story, Emmett's going around and he's being chased by all of the micromanagers and the good cop, bad cop. For the first half of the story, he's responding to what the bad guys are doing. After the Dark Night of the Soul, it changes from a response to an attack. And after the Dark Night of the Soul, Emmett, instead of running away, he runs towards the Lord Business's castle, right? In Coco, Miguel, instead of trying to run away, he's going to figure out how to go get what he needs. And he's going to go to the bad guy and he's going to confront him. Because after the Dark Night of the Soul, the good guy is mad and he's tired of being pushed around. And so that's what you want to do in your story, is you want to create this sense of, in the first half, a little bit of fear, to the second half, a lot of anger. And in the second half of the story, the protagonist is going to go full speed and he's going to attack every chance he can. And that's super important in your story, and you want to do that. Now, in not my next book, but I've been thinking about a couple of different books. And so I wanted to show you one, which I don't really have a good name for this one yet. Maybe it's Gideon and the Shadow Warriors, or no, I think it was Demons in the Dark I was thinking about. I'm not sure. Demons in the Dark, I think, is what I was going to do. But this is about a giant named Gideon. And in order to understand the Dark Night of the Soul, you have to understand the character arc, because the trick that the hero figures out in order to change defeat into victory and chase after the bad guy, that trick has to be related to his character arc. And that's critical. The character arc is always critical in every story. And so in this one, let me put it up over here. Boop, there. So here's something, background about the character arc. So Gideon, who is a giant, he really wants his brother's recognition and respect. And he wants his own, because he really doesn't understand who he is, because giants are all about being big and strong and smashing things with their war hammers and going on the attack. And Gideon doesn't want to do any of that. He likes to read. He likes to invent things and build little contraptions, and that's not a giant thing to do. Not at all. So he's ridiculed for that, especially by his brother. His brother does not respect him. And so the character arc for this story is Gideon not just getting his brother's respect, but getting his own respect and feel good about himself, which is super important. And so now let me show you the Dark Night of the Soul. It's going to go right in the center of, right, ooh, there. Okay, so, and let me read this over here. There it is. So in the story here, Gideon Wargaze, he's in this big, deep, dark cave thing with his brother and with an old wizard guy that I don't have a name for yet. I haven't figured that out yet. But they're trapped on a rickety old rope bridge with little wooden slats going across it, and they're standing on this bridge, and there's shadow warriors on the front of them and shadow warriors behind them, and they're trapped in the middle of the bridge. I mean, how are they going to get out of here? They are totally trapped. And so we need to figure out, how is Gideon going to save the day here in this Dark Night of the Soul? Because this is going to look like it's impossible. And so that's my Dark Night of the Soul for this story. Now, what always comes right after the Dark Night of the Soul is the recommitment. And for the recommitment here, this is what's linked to the character arc. And this is this is part of what the character learns about himself, so that he can recommit and he can save all of his friends in the Dark Night of the Soul. So here's the recommitment. Let's put it right in the middle. So Gideon is standing on the bridge, and he sees a cave down in there. The bridge goes across a deep chasm. It's like the chasm of emptiness or something. There's some name for it. I figured out that was kind of snappy, but I don't remember now. But he sees a cave down lower on the walls of the chasm, and he does the math, and he figures out how far down it is, because that's something he does with his inventions, is estimating distances or something. So I have to, at the beginning of this story, put that in there. If you've seen my little writing tip about show what the character needs before they use it, I have to show earlier in the story that he is estimating distances for his inventions to make some big thing or not, so that he can remember that here and use that skill. So he's going to start to believe in himself and believe he can think his way out of this. And he sees the cliff, and he figures out where they need to be on the bridge, and he pushes his friends forward, and he says, hang on. And he pulls out a sword. A sword is not something that a giant uses. They use war hammers. So again, this is something else that Gideon is going to embrace in himself that it's okay to have a sword. You don't have to have a big honking hammer. And so he cuts the ropes, and the bridge falls, but they hang on and swing down to the other side, and all the shadow warriors fall. Ah! And then they're able to go into that big cave in the wall, and they find a bunch of things there that Gideon can create something and build something to help them escape and go find the bad guy and destroy him. So after this recommitment here, when he sees all these parts and he can build a contraption, this is where he starts feeling better about himself. And that's really important. Again, the recommitment has to be linked to the character arc. So if I put the summary here, so here's the, let me put a summary right there. So you see the Dark Night of the Soul, giants are trapped on the bridge seems impossible. Recommitment, Gideon uses something from his character arc, and he figures out how to use his inventions to save the day. So you need to think about that when you're outlining your story. When I typically do my stories, I think of a couple things first. I think about the character arc, because that's the most important thing. What are you trying to teach with your story? You should always be trying to teach something. And then what's the final scene going to be, the final battle? And what is the character going to learn from his character arc in order to defeat the bad guy? And then I think about what the midpoint is going to be. What's the Dark Night of the Soul going to be, which again is linked to the character arc. And then usually the next thing I'll figure out is the hook, the very first scene. What can I do that looks exciting, that can hook a reader into the story? I think you really need to focus on this when you're doing your outlining your story, when you're coming up with your concept and your premise, and if you're using rule number 4 from the Pixar rules and thinking about how to break down your story, you need to think about the Dark Night of the Soul, because this is going to make your story really pop. I will typically, and so if you think about Finding Nemo, the Dark Night of the Soul is probably where Marlin finds Nemo inside the little plastic bag, and he's pretending to be dead, so they'll flush him down the toilet. And because all things lead to the ocean, right? And so when Marlin sees Nemo like that, that's probably the Dark Night of the Soul for Marlin. And he thinks it's game over, and there's no point in going anymore, and he's ready to give up. And then, but there's also a second Dark Night of the Soul right before the ending. In Star Wars, this is probably when Luke switches off his Navicomputer thing, and he's going to shoot his little torpedo thing into the exhaust port just using the Force. In Nemo, this is probably when they're swimming away and they go to help all the fish in the big fishing net. And they're coming down and they're bringing it down and they crash and all the fish get away and you see Nemo laying there and it looks like he's dead. That's probably the second Dark Night of the Soul. In my books, typically there's the last battle and it looks like Herobrine is going to get Game Knight finally. And finally Herobrine's going to win, but then Game Knight has another trick up his sleeve. That's linked to his character arc. And so there's always a second Dark Night of the Soul at the end, right before the resolution, and that's also important. And if you watch all the Pixar movies, you'll see they always have that there somewhere. It's always the best part. So think about this. Think about the Dark Night of the Soul for your story. If you have a movie you really like, in the comments below, why don't you put in what you think the Dark Night of the Soul is for that movie, or maybe a book that you like to read. And put those in there so we can have a good discussion about it, because the Dark Night of the Soul is super important. I hope this is helpful. Thanks. Keep writing. Watch out for creepers. Bye.